Hello and welcome to the first Let's Argue About Plants of 2026. I'm Danielle Sherry. I'm the executive editor of Fine Gardening.
And I am Carol Collins. I am the editor-in-chief at Fine Gardening. Happy New Year, Danielle.
Happy New Year, Carol. This is the podcast for people who love plants.
But not always the same ones. Did we forget that?
Oh,
it's a new year. It's like
I forgot the
smooth
intro.
brain from vacation.
Yeah, I forgot the intro. I forgot my name. I forgot my title. I barely remembered how to log into this, to see your smiling face. But Happy New Year. We're here. We're doing it.
Happy New Year.
Well, so this is an interesting topic to kick off the new year because, we heard from you listeners and watchers on YouTube, if you watch us on YouTube, and you guys, kind of came back to us and said, hey, we love the plant forward topics that you guys do, which is primarily what we do. But, a lot of times when we do Q&A questions, they ask us about our gardens and what our plans are. And we also get a lot of feedback too of, hey, let's talk about some design concepts and things. So we started off, we're kicking off the new year. We've listened, we've heard, and we're going to do our garden plans for 2026. And Carol, I think we both took different approaches to this a bit, right, than our normal approach.
Yes. And I peeked at what you were doing and it encouraged me to do, because I was thinking, oh, okay, it's, for plants and we'll talk about what we're doing with them, but this is even better. And I don't think we've ever done this before, have we?
I don't think so. And I don't know. I can't remember how. I think we're at we're nearing the 300 marker. So we've been doing this. We've been at this a long time. And I think this is a first. And I was really excited. So we took the concept where, plants might be mentioned in some of these, but, we took the concept of, what are we renovating? What are we reimagining? What are we redoing? What are we expanding in our own landscapes, gardens, gardening approaches for 2026? And I'm hoping that it's inspirational for those who are listening, because I'm going to take a heavy hand to some areas of my garden. And the other thing is I'm hoping to be inspired by hearing what you're doing. And it might help me kind of hone in a little bit more of what I have to do in my yard. So what was the first thing, when you saw, okay, garden plans for 2026, what was the first thing that you said, yep, this is going top on the list?
Okay. All right. So my first one is project number one is editing and improving my manic pixie woodland clearing garden.
Is that trademarked? Manic pixie woodland clearing? I love that.
So I have spent, time because people ask, or we ask authors, what is the style of your garden? People ask us, what is the style of your garden? And I never had a good answer, but you've heard about this, the trope of the manic pixie dream girl in movies, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Zoe Deschanel, right? That's her MO
totally,
in all movies.
Totally. Yes. And so for those who are not familiar, the manic pixie dream girl is the quirky, fun, rule-breaking, otherworldly character who just magically appears in the plot of a movie, and her main function is to help this brooding main male character, which is I'm sorry, but too many movies. That's the whole theme. And he helps, she helps him learn to lighten up and enjoy life. And she, magically appears, magically disappears. Anyway, at some point I was that's what I want this garden that's between the house and our offices to be. I want lightness and color and magic, and I would little woodland creatures floating around, and butterflies and hummingbirds, right? So I should also explain that we have two buildings. We bought this
Yes. I was going to
property.
say, Carol is not like talking about
Yeah,
like the main offices of fine gardening and she's going to do like 20
no,
miles of landscaping here. No, no, we're talking about
no,
your
we've
home
been
offices.
home office. So we've been remote since 2020,
Mhm.
and really that's when I started seeing my home garden with new eyes because we're there all day every day, and
Yep.
especially during lockdown when all of that was new. I was like, I see these gardens, which are actually they're rain gardens. They were designed to treat the roof water from this building that I'm recording from. Um, but we built this building because we bought this property, two-bedroom house, three family members. We just needed more space,
Yep.
but the house is in a regulated wetland. Anything within 100 feet of the little creek that runs along our property line is regulated, and so we really couldn't add on to the house. Uh, but we put a building as close to the road as we possibly could, and that's the barn. We call it the barn. No animals live here. It's office space. It's studio space. We have a like little living room downstairs where we hang out after work in the evenings. Um, and
It's the
outside the barn we
coolest
have,
building, listeners and watcher. It is the coolest building. Like I just want to like hang there. Like it is the
it's a
coolest
great
building.
hangout.
Yeah, it's a good
Yeah.
hang space. Carol is, well, you can see the artist in Carol, and I will say it's adornments. It's just a place you want to be. Like if you opened up a cool coffee shop and vinyl listening records studio, like people would flock to it. It's that cool.
So right, or we talked about having a speakeasy here back when we
Ah,
still imbibed. But we drink like tea now, so it could be a tea house.
tea house. Oh, there we go. So
Um,
you've set us up so you have, you know, your main residence. Obviously, you wake up in the morning and then you're like, okay, gotta go to the office, and you travel this journey of
yeah,
how far are we talking?
it's like 20-30 feet.
Okay,
So
all
we
right.
have a stone patio. We have a couple of decks
Mhm.
because there's a grade change between the house and the barn too. So we've got, it's probably a total of 4 or 5 steps up and down. Part of this is these two beds that are functional rain gardens, but they're also the part of our landscape we see the most. It's like, it's sort of the curb appeal of our property. And for the longest time, I had a couple blueberry bushes. I tried black raspberry, thornless black raspberry, which like that was a disaster. Got those out of there. I've just been trying all these things, but what I've really been focusing on is bringing more color, more texture. I added a weeping red bud last summer. I've
Cool.
got the sort of underplanting is California poppy and Angelita sedum for like a lot of, bright warm color. I've added a ton of salvia, some of which I start from seeds, some of which I buy from the nursery. I added some really cool mountain hydrangeas. Can't remember the cultivar. Sorry, smooth brain, new year. Can't remember the cultivar. But last summer I bought 3 of them right when it was like 100 degrees and nursed those through the rest of the summer. Um, there are also some things that have seeded in. So I have some calico aster in there. I've got goldenrod, couple different kinds.
Nice.
That so it's like my manic pixie dream garden is like getting a little too chaotic, which is like
Okay.
sort of the downside of the manic pixie dream girl. And so my goal in the coming year is to do a little editing.
Okay.
I needed to look a little more organized, I guess, or
Okay.
yeah, definitely. So the goldenrod, that's easy.
Hmm.
Old field goldenrod or gray goldenrod, Nemorosa, Solidago nemorosa, that can stay. That's nice and small.
Okay.
Canadensis, the big tall one, that's got to
Yeah.
go. That's
Yeah.
going to another section of the garden. I'm not going to waste it, but you can actually just sort of pull those out by the root late in the
Hmm.
season and stick them in somewhere else. They will come back fine the next year. But this year is really like, I want to look at it with fresh new eyes, do some editing, and Yeah, make it feel a little less chaotic. And yeah, because we want to
Gotcha.
be uplifted, enlightened, like the brooding main character. Like when you come out getting ready for a hard day at work, or you're coming back at the end of a hard day, the garden should be something that kind of lifts you up.
Totally. So you're gonna basically like look at it and like kind of see like what you've got, and then you're gonna come in. Some stuff is gonna get not tossed. Some stuff is going to be removed. Some stuff is going to
Mm-hmm.
be maybe hemmed in. Are you thinking about like some structural add-ins at all? I know that like a lot of times when we do naturalistic gardens, they, what do they call it? Cues of care. They add in, maybe
Yeah.
more of like the weeping red bud that you have. Are you talking about like
Yeah.
adding in maybe some more bones focal points in there? Is that another
Yeah. I
step of it?
don't have I don't have any evergreens. And like again, we look at
Oh,
this every day all year round. So I'm thinking, maybe it's time to figure out dwarf conifers because it's a small
oh,
space
yeah,
too. I can't
yeah.
have something that gets too big, but like that's one thing I thought of is like maybe this is a place for dwarf evergreens.
Oh,
Um,
definitely. And
so
just
that was one idea. Yeah.
definitely. And I think also like that's such a good spot, like you said, because, in case this is your first time listening to the podcast, Carol and I both garden and live in New England. So, right about now, it is gray, brown, and white when it snows. And that's about all you see outside. So, having that evergreen structure, especially on that journey to and fro, would be really cool with some dwarf evergreens. Awesome. Awesome.
Right? Like something like a camocypra, something
Yeah. Yeah.
interesting, but
Love it.
fun. Still
Yes, but fun. Got to keep that pixie energy going. That's
right.
so fun. Oh my gosh. All right. That's inspirational because I think it's really hard to when you've worked on a garden or a section of the garden for so long and then it reaches that tipping point, right? And it might not be, a manic pixie energy, but it might just be, the perennials have just beefed out for 10 years and it's like okay now it's looking a little blurry, right? And how do I go in, how do I edit, you would think that we're great at that, right? Like that's our profession, editors, but when you're doing it in the garden instead of on a page, it's really hard to go in there and be like, all right, so here's what stays, here's what goes, here's where I've got to add. And that can be intimidating. It definitely can. But I support your goal.
Thank you.
So, my first goal, my first plan for 2026, my first project has been something that I've kind of kicked around for years. If you've listened to this podcast ever before, you have probably heard me whine, complain, lament about Hospital Hill, which is this terrible section right behind my house, a very steep inclined hill where I'm pretty much convinced they dug the foundation for our house and tossed all that terrible fill in the back of the house that's like bright orange, has zero fertility to it. But unfortunately, it is literally the view off of the back of our house, off of our patio. It is a rough spot. It's in full sun. It has terrible root competition because it is right along our natural wooded lot property line. So terrible root competition, terrible soil, full sun. It is Hospital Hill. And for so many years, it's where I have chucked and literally chucked plants that I didn't know what to do with, divisions off of perennials in some of the other gardens, unfortunate gifted plants that I don't really like that much, but I'm just going to throw them out in the back. And it's really been in more recent years an experimental spot where, I have purposely put things to see, hey, is this going to thrive on very minimal care and really probably some of the most terrible conditions you could possibly garden in? And I am reporting back, 15 years later now that, the hospital and the hill are starting to look a little bit more manicured and a little bit nicer. And there's, some grasses some native grasses that have taken and done well. There's a couple of evergreens, mostly junipers, that have done pretty well. So this last year, I made more of a concerted effort to beat back the weeds, do some leaf mold, kind of make it look like a more manicured area. And the thing is that it's got the native woodland beyond it, and it's never going to be something that I can edge, maintain, mulch on a regular basis because it's this really, really wicked pitch. So last year, we did the fine gardening tour to the UK, and I became uber familiarized with the term dead hedge, which for those who are listening sounds like exactly the opposite of what a gardening podcast should be recommending is dead hedges. But what this actually is it's this really artistic way of using dead branches, leaves, garden detritus of any kind, shape, and form, and you create these fences, basically, or hedges. They can be sinuous. They can be as simple as stacked logs in kind of a long fence-like trail. They can also be extremely, extremely beautiful, which sounds, counterintuitive, something that's dead. But when we were in the UK, people took their spring gleanings from pruning and just wove them into these gorgeous, gorgeous, interesting art pieces in the garden. And I'm really into, and I had the idea then, and I'm going to execute this year of, I want to install some dead hedges up on that hospital hill. One, I think it's going to help slow down some of the rainwater wash that comes down that hill because it just kind of, creates these permeable stop gaps, almost like fencing along the hospital hill. I think it's also going to be great because it's going to be kind of like an art piece, it is a chaotic spot. I don't think it's ever not going to be a chaotic spot, but I think that'll add some definition to it. If I had this, kind of interesting wooden fencing, hedging running kind of all along the width of the hospital hill. And the other thing is I think it's going to be a nice, almost, nod to the woodland that starts beyond it. It kind of brings that down in, and it'll be this nice transition, to manicured garden to the natural woods. I think that that's going to add a really nice spot. And I just, the more I read about these dead hedges, the more I'm in love with them because they're great for wildlife. Insects use it as overwintering for egg laying and that sort of thing. So that's great for that. It naturally decomposes, of course, and you continue to add, as you do your spring cleanup or, your pruning, you can add to this piled up hedge basically, and it decomposes. So it's going to be slowly improving that terrible soil that I have back there. And the other thing is that's where we have the most bird activity probably on our entire property. And I really think that it's going to be a boon for bird activity because it's going to give them somewhere to hide, to nest. So I'm super into this whole dead hedge idea. So it can be small, it can be large, it can be whatever, but I'm super excited. I think the main thing for me is going to be basically tapping in some tree trunks or logs that are going to hold the dead hedge in place because it is on that hill. It's not it's not a flat surface. So, I'm going to have to peg it almost like you would create a wattle fence at first, just so it holds it back. But yeah, I'm super excited. I think there's nothing but upside to it, particularly focal point, benefits to wildlife. And I really think that it's going to help transition this area that is evolving, quite frankly. And I've just not paid enough attention to it.
So exciting. I can't wait to see how that turns out. We'll want photos.
Yes. All that's in the show notes
at the end of the
now.
Year, perhaps.
Yeah, now I'm committing to it, right? I had to think about that when I put these projects down too. I'm like, oh man, we're going to do a follow-up show, aren't we?
We totally are.
Okie dokie. Carol, all right, project number 2. I mean, we came out strong. Like, those are 2 big projects, each of us. So, is your next project of equal sweat equity, or is it a little bit less?
It's the continuation of a project that was sort of this past year's project.
Nice.
So
Nice.
my next year in 2026, I am going to add more native plants to my stream bank beds.
Nice.
So I've mentioned this stream that runs through along our property border, southerly property border before. It's a major feature of our landscape. In August of 2024, our little corner of Western Connecticut, and it was very localized, we had historic rain and catastrophic flooding. And it was very serious. Roads washed out. There were fatalities, just a couple miles from here. Somebody was driving out of a shopping center and a dam broke somewhere and their car got submerged. It was very, very serious. I was out shopping when this happened, and I was 15 minutes from home. It took me an hour to get home because I would come to a road, there'd be water across it. You do not drive across running water over the road. That is very dangerous. You don't do it. I kept turning around. I finally found my way to high ground, got on the interstate and came home. But it was a scary hour. And I got home. Our little creek was overflowing. It was over the road, but just a couple inches. That was one case where I broke the rule. I drove across the bridge through the 2 inches of water and I came home. I've got videos in the show notes of what the stream looked like in flood. And guys, I made some effort. I had to plug my phone into my computer to get these videos transferred. They would not email because they're very big. But our sleepy little creek was probably 5 feet deep or more at flood.
That's huge.
6 feet deep at flood stage. It would have been very dangerous. We stayed clear of it. We advised drivers from out of state who were coming down our hill and wanted to go across it. We're like, we wouldn't recommend that. Go back up the hill. What I found after the water went down, and that was, just 24 hours later, things were more or less back to normal, is that the parts of the garden that were vegetated, garden beds, the lawn, just plain old grass, were fine. There was a lot of debris on the surface, rocks the size of your head, all over the lawn. But once that was cleaned up, that went back to normal. But along the stream bank, where there was no, it was sort of cut already by previous water flowing through there, we lost 4 or 5 feet of the stream bank. Just washed
from
away.
Erosion,
Just erosion. It was, and actually, I used a photograph of that as a cross section of soil for a soil article because you could see all the layers and
making lemonade out of lemons.
All right. But to prevent further erosion in the future, what really needed to happen was I needed to do a sort of a cut and fill operation to take the topsoil and turn it into beds. They're sloped, but gently sloped, not a sheer cut off like what we had before. And I was doing a new driveway in front of the barn, between the barn and the street, and I used some salvage sod to make a grass path that could be mowed that actually goes down to the stream edge.
Nice.
And we when we built the barn, I had to put together a wetlands remediation plan, and part of that was I committed to planting only native species within 20 feet of the stream.
Nice.
So this new bed, it's actually a couple beds that I created on either side of the grass path. Those are going to be all native plants. So
Nice.
I made a trip to Earth Tones, which is our local native plant nursery. And I got some cool native willows and the native spirea. I think it's steeplebush.
Mm-hmm.
couple other things. I got this really cool northern red oak. It is golden dragon. That was a gift late in the season, and that went in a place of honor, like right at the top of the path.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, I've got red cedar in there that just had seeded itself elsewhere in the garden that I moved there a few years ago. So it's really starting to come together, but this season is the season to add more native plants to that area.
Definitely.
And
And the ones that you just that you mentioned too, like especially the willows, the steeple bush, even the oak, like those are thirsty plants. Like those are going to draw a lot of water too, which should help stabilize. Or, if there's a flood event, knock on wood, hopefully not, it should help mitigate it that much more, because it sounds like you've been very intentional about the native plants that you're putting in there are thirsty, are big drinkers, basically.
And a lot of roots. You want a lot of roots. And once those roots start knitting together, that's what really locks the soil in place, and water can flow right over it. So one thing I've thought about doing is getting like the red twig dogwood that's native.
Yeah.
And you can get cuttings of that in winter, jam them into the soil, and they will root. And that's something that's more affordable than buying, $100 whole plant in,
Totally.
5-gallon. Yeah. So that's something I'm thinking about doing as an economical way to sort of, build up that vegetative buffer along the stream bank. Most of the stream bank is a gradual enough slope that it really wasn't affected too much by the flooding. So it's really only one area that I have to concentrate on. So that's my big goal next summer for that area.
That's so cool. And like even just what you mentioned, it's so interesting. Like that, what a beautiful tapestry of color too, because even what you've already got in there, you've got some blooms that are happening, you've got some beautiful colored stems. If you end up going into the native dogwood range, you've got the oak tree, which of course is going to put on a show in fall and spring when it pushes new growth. And then you've got that late spring early summer bloomer with the steeple bush. That's just awesome. It sounds like it's going to be, once stuff starts filling in and you do your supplementing, what a cool spot. And functional, safety.
Functional. And I've had authors explain to me about I think it's called a desire line. It's like the direction people want to walk, and people want to go to the water. They see it and they want to get close to it. So this is, a way to make that happen. I think I'm going to have to build a little bridge at the bottom of this path, though, so they can get across the stream.
That's like a little manic pixie that you'll put in there, like a beautiful bridge. I love it. Well, so okay, I'm gonna switch it up. The one that I was gonna talk about, because I'll do a continuation of a project that was started last year as well for me and for my garden and property. So we've got Hospital Hill. We just talked about it. And then we have the back of the house, north facing. That's where the deck is. And then there is and patio on the side. And it blends right into Hospital Hill. Well, so in between deck, house, back of house deck, and back of patio and Hospital Hill, there is this awkward 7-foot wide tract. I'm not even going to call it a path. It's a tract. It was for many years, for 12 years, 13 years, it was grass that refused to grow. So pretty much just a muddy pit in spring that the dog liked to roll in. And then in summer, it was a dusty pit that the dog liked to roll in. And then in winter, it was an icy break your leg that the dog never fortunately broke her leg on pit. So it's always been this terrible area of our property, but it is the main thoroughfare to get to the backyard. So it's hard to describe. Go to the show notes. There's some terrible full sun photos, but you'll see what I'm talking about. However, because it's north facing and in the shadow of the house as well, it's been the only place that I can really grow full shade plants. So I have this, cute little shade garden that's like limped along for many years, where I like put my choice perennials, and oh gosh, and I've got an inky in there that's so beautiful, and a bunch of painted ferns, and gingers aplenty, and I love it so much. So last year I said enough is enough. We put in a retaining wall. We built a retaining wall out of old railroad ties. Don't at me. I know there's probably stuff that's in there that we don't really particularly like, but it was upcycling of a track that was being demolished nearby. So we used old railroad ties as a kind of a knee wall, retaining wall. I'm capping that with some native bluestone pieces. So it's kind of like a sitting wall, if you will. So that's separating Hospital Hill out. And we still have this 7-foot track. So I used pea stone. I edged it in like between the wall now and the gardens. I edged it with a natural quarantine steel that just rusted out edging. And I filled it in with pea stone with some pockets of native field stones too, just to kind of break up the expanse of pea stone. And it was an idea that honestly I copied from designer Jay Sifford down in North Carolina. We did an article on pet friendly gardening, and he installed this similar pea stone with, natural field stones, breaking it up, and the edging for that garden, specifically for the dogs that lived there, because they had made a mess of any place that there was turf. So I thought, oh, this is great. So did all that. Where am I going with this? Like, what's left to do? Well, what's left to do right now is that is where our 120-pound propane tank lives, is just awesome, right on the edge of now what I've created, this beautiful little walkway and entryway. There's this honkin' propane tank that is bright stinking white. It's bigger than me. It stands taller than me, which isn't saying much, but it's over 5 foot tall. It's an eyesore. It's a total eyesore. And I noticed last year when I was all excited about all the hard work we'd done, and I'm taking all these pictures, and it's just, it's the ugliest thing. And I guess I never really spent a whole ton of time back there, so it never really bothered me. Now it's bothering me. So I'm soliciting for ideas from the listeners because I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do to basically screen off this Uggo propane tank. Now there still has to be access to it. So, I was looking at all the things that they make, and, the plans. I do have a husband who can, build some things. So, maybe it's a screen situation, but it needs to still be accessible because we still need to get propane delivered, if we don't want to freeze to death. So I'm looking at, they make these kind of powder coated metal screening options that kind of have a swing gate on one of the 3 sides and open it up. It's, you can do whatever color you want to. Black, dark gray kind of recedes. I'm thinking that would work. But if I settle on that, I of course want to grow something on it, because that ends up being like, that's a trellis, and I don't want, this big constructed thing. So my first thought was, pipe vine, would grow in shade, but I'm really afraid that's a little bit too aggressive and big. I mean, native, great for wildlife, but it's kind of a beastly vine. So I worry that that's a bit too much for that. And, I'm going to be out there with a machete each year trying to hone it back. So, I was thinking an annual shade loving vine, like a Rex begonia vine, maybe just to cover that. And I like that that's, if you're not familiar with Rex begonia vine, listeners, it's, it really does look like these Rex begonias with like purple and silver leaves, and they're very long. And I think cistus is its genus, and it grows quickly. and then it would die back at the end of the year, so there wouldn't be that fight with the propane delivery guy when he's coming to fill the tanks. So yeah, I'm thinking along those lines, but I'm definitely soliciting ideas, Carol, for other ways to screen this honkin', it's bigger than an AC unit monstrosity that's really ruining my whole vibe of this area.
I remember at Longwood years ago, I was in a sort of a back section of the gardens, and there was some kind of equipment, like maybe a pump for one of the fountains. And they had just thrown like the sort of camo fabric, like you would make a hunting blind
Oh,
out
like
of.
a duck blind that they put over boats and stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got a sort of, it's green, it's sort of got a texture to it that looks from a distance like leaves, and it blended right in. And then they had some, something tall and spiky in front of it. But that was like, I thought that was a genius, simple solution that, it took somebody, 10 minutes to go and throw this fabric over it. And then when they need to access it, they just picked it up and
pick it right
did
off.
what they need to do and put it back on.
Oh.
I imagine it would last for quite a while. Not quite as permanent a solution as the cool powder-coated surround.
Yeah, but less expensive. So we're going to have to see how much project 1 costs me. And then if project 2 needs to be a little, I like that idea. I like that. And I think like maybe that'll also give me a year or so to think about this before execution or before I'm able to implement it. That's a good stopgap in between. I like that idea a lot.
And then you can move it somewhere else when you do something more permanent with.
Totally.
Yeah, I don't know.
My neighbor's big old truck that's broken down on the edge of the property now. Yeah, I can just throw that right over.
Disappears.
Love it. Love it. Love it. What a great idea. All right. So, I mean, we're 45 minutes in now and we've only done 2. So, okay, what's number 3? We're obviously very passionate about our garden plans.
Well, fortunately, yes. And my first 2 are my bigger 2, so my second 2 should hopefully I'll make it snappy. So project number 3 is this is going to be my year. I'm going to get me a beaked yucca, yucca rostrata, zones 5 to 10. And I want to add it to my front full sun beds for some contrast. Best sun in our property is between the barn and the town road. And I only started building garden beds out there in 2020 during lockdown. Before that, we had like a 1/4 acre of scruffy, weedy lawn and a derelict privet hedge that was right next to the road, and just like collected... those little single-use alcohol bottles, like
nips,
Fireball and whatnot. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So there was somebody, maybe more than one person in the neighborhood, and they would have that on their way home, and into the hedge it would go. I bought like 100 of those. What the
hell is the matter with people?
Seriously, I don't know. But the privet hedge had to go. So in 2020, during lockdown, our son, who is middle school aged at the time, he didn't have camp. So we were paying him to do projects. He ripped out that hedge. Yes. We planted pumpkins there that year. And I couldn't believe how many of my neighbors were they stop and talk to us about the pumpkins. They were, what's going on here? I had no idea how many people were keeping an eye on our garden. Of course, during lockdown, the only thing you could do is go out for walks in your own neighborhood. So but it inspired me to start planting things that were, even more interesting than pumpkins out there. We've got annuals. I've been adding perennials and shrubs out there. And a few years ago, I started adding island beds in the middle of the lawn, again, to take advantage of that full sun, which we really don't have elsewhere on the property, except the vegetable garden. That's a whole other thing. But, I have a lot of color, but there is a certain sameness to the scale and texture of the plants that I grow. So I've been on the lookout for something really different that I can put in there to punctuate. And yucca rostrata, it keeps popping up again and again in like authors' gardens from Denver to the Pacific Northwest. It's pretty hardy, zones 5 to 10. Not all yuccas are, but I love the color. It's like icy blue. I love the texture. It's got these long leaves, and it makes this shape that is just totally different than anything else I have in my garden. My only question is, do I need more than one?
Yes.
I think I'll start with one. You think yes? I think maybe yes too.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Just because it's such an arresting plant that I think, especially in the area that you're talking about, I think, I think you do. But this is a good rule of thumb, right? If it's going to be an investment plant, try one, see how it does. If it does well, then you can, invest in a couple of more. But also with yuccas, don't they sometimes create babies?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if this one makes a lot of pups, but maybe I'll have to do a little bit of research.
Yeah. So you might be able to invest in one and and get to, because I know that they do send up those crazy wild seeds, right? Those seed pods too that are kind of fleshy. I know a lot of people don't like yucca flowers, you either love them or hate them, but they definitely create some interesting seed pods. And I mean, if anybody can grow a yucca from seed, it's you, Carol. So yeah, starting with one and see where it goes.
Or starting with a small one. They get quite tall, and they're evergreen, and they have sort of like a tree-like presence, but more like a Dr. Seuss kind of tree.
Yeah.
Deer resistant, rabbit resistant. I'm very excited to try this plant. So
I think so too.
Yeah, that's definitely a goal for 2026.
I feel like one of the best examples of it that I think that I've seen is the article that you just did with Michael Barber out in Colorado. Yes. He had a beautiful one, right? That had stemmed up, and he kind of had lifted its canopy a bit, so it was against that fence, that beautiful cedar fence in the back.
Yeah, I think he didn't do. I mean, he's left you can either leave the skirt on, which is the previous year's foliage that sort of goes down.
Okay.
So I think he left that alone. But as it gets older, it gets taller and taller, and that mass of foliage gets higher and higher. And his is really super. That's the photo that's in the show notes.
Oh, okay.
Anybody hasn't learned how to go to findartgardening.com, click on the podcast tab and find the show notes if you want to see this plant or any of the other things we've been talking about. It's in there.
Definitely. And then we also have, for our regular episodes, we have all the plant lists in there, which my neighbor the other day was telling me was so invaluable that she went in there and she cut and she pasted, and she's has a rolling tab of Let's Argue About Plants plant list that she has to shop for in the spring. So I loved that idea too. All right. So on the opposite end, I have a renovate or remove situation. So you're going to plant and I'm going to get pretty harsh. I'm 15 years in, basically, in the front gardens, and they planted in the front. I am primarily a woody garden, woodies, and I have a Japanese stewardia, and I have a Heronswood Globe Katsura. So what I would say are two very choice woody plants. They were an investment in the beginning of my gardening career. They have two separate issues going on. All right. So the first issue was the Japanese stewardia, and this is completely on me. It wasn't that I put these plants in the wrong place. I gave them plenty of clearance off the house. I mean, when I say in the front of the house, they are 20 feet off the house. They are good. But the stewardia came with a double leader. And when I purchased it, it killed me to cut off half of my plant right after I just purchased it. So I put it in the ground and I'm like, it's fine. It's fine. I don't see that double leader. It's fine. Well, that tree is now 15 years old and it's compromised. It has clearly an issue of one of those double leaders leaning to the left and has become to the point where if it gets a snow load on it, there is a possibility that it will crack, it will break, it's big, it will take out everything that's underneath it, and it might even lead to the tree's death because it is now basically these two leaders are competing with one another. So this year in the fall, I took a photo. You'll see in the show notes, these two problematic trees happen to be right next to each other. So you'll see the Stewartia. I took a photo. I made a little like X on the leader that I think is the one that needs to go, clearly the lead. And I sent it to our resident pruning expert, Ed Gregan, who also happens to be a family member of mine. And I said, cut or no cut? What should I do? And explain the situation. And he said basically, yes, like at this point, you got to go in, it's not going to get any better. The tree's not getting any smaller. So you got to get in there and you have to do it. So, I'm going to follow the 3-cut method because it is such a big branch. I'm going to need a chainsaw. I'm going to need some help with it. But I'm going to do, you take off the canopy, the part that, weighs a lot. You do one cut, you get a little bit further down, you do another cut. So you're not, splitting as you go in for your final cut. And then you try to get just beyond the collar and make a third cut on that leader. And, don't use any tar, don't use any tree paint as they do, even though it seems like, oh my gosh, you're cutting off like a major limb of this tree, half the tree basically. Don't do any of that. It's either going to heal itself and be able to get through, or it wasn't meant to be, unfortunately. So I'm taking the risk, I'm taking the chunk because it just has to happen, and it's painful. It's super painful. And then, ironically, right next door to that problematic Stewartia that's my fault was a Heronswood Globe Katsura, so that's Cetercephalum japonicum, and it is a Dan Hinckley plant, and it was a plant that I'm pretty sure was a small whip that I traveled back from Seattle with back in the day. From Dan Hinckley's former garden, Heronswood. And it was a plant that, this happens, was listed as 8 to 15 feet tall and wide. Turns out it must be happy in its conditions because it's 20 to 25 feet tall and wide. And that's way too big for where it's at. So, I've looked into it. It is now big enough that it is blocking all of the windows, the bay windows of my second story of my house. It has gotten massive. It has also gotten so wide that it is blocking the front entryway and steps to our house. So it is a beast. It's gotten out of control. I take some of the blame too, because sometimes with these cultivars, you ultimately don't know. I mean, this is a newer plant. I went with 8 to 15 feet, but it's not. It has far exceeded that. So, I've done some investigating. Apparently Katsuras don't take very well to coppicing, because I thought, maybe I'll severely renovate prune this and get it all the way down. So apparently they don't do well with that at all, but I think that's my only choice at this point. The other option is, someone mentioned to me, taking it down, leaving about 1 foot to 1.5 foot of the stump and hoping that it suckers. But the risk I take with that is not knowing if it's on its own rootstock. So if it starts to sucker, what it might be is actually the straight species of Katsura, which gets far bigger than Heronswood Globe. So I think I'm going with the coppicing. I think it's going to be super painful. I think I'm going to be doing it within the next month or so, and I'll report back if it works. And if not, I think this is a good lesson for all of us. Listen, learn through my pain that sometimes a plant just outgrows or outlives its spot, and you gotta take it on the chin and move on.
That's hard, but yeah, I understand. You got to do it.
You got to do it. You got to do it. All right, Carol, I cheated on my last one. So I'm going to let you see what you did for your last goal of 2026 or garden plan of 2026.
I don't know if I'm going to, I don't know if it's cheating, but It is different. It's not something that I'm doing outdoors. This is an indoor project. And what I'm going to do is update my garden site plan. Oh. So putting a plan on paper is a lot of work, but it is totally worth it. And people say to me, oh, it must be so easy for you. You went to art school, but it is hard work for everyone. And that's why garden designers deserve every single penny for generating a detailed site plan. It is a lot of work. It takes hours. But I think even if you think you can't draw, this is something you can do. Mm-hmm. And it is so helpful for seeing like the hidden potential in your garden. I think I did my first site plan years ago when we were planning the barn. I had to, we got engineer drawings for roof water management. And what the engineer wanted to do is collect all the roof water in gutters, pipe it to these underground concrete chambers that are filled with gravel. There was like
dry wells
or something. I don't even know, like too many that were going to be buried in the root zones of some of our best trees. So It's like this valuable resource. We have sandy soil. We really just can't water it enough. We're going to take this water and we're going to be putting it deep underground and destroying my trees. Like I just couldn't see my way clear to do that. So what I did was I applied for a variance to build these rain gardens to process the groundwater and actually like make use of it to grow plants. And so I just drew on top of the engineer's drawing. So that was my first site plan. I submitted it. I got approved, saved tens of thousands of dollars. And instead of something, spending all that money on something you can't see, we have these rain gardens that are my manic pixie dream woodland garden.
It comes full circle.
It's true. And everything that I've talked about in this episode, has come about because of this, planning on paper process. But it is nice to have something to start with. So if you don't have an engineer's drawings like I did, maybe look in the town records for a survey of your property or Google Maps. If your site, and the caveat is if your site has a lot of trees, there's parts you can't see, but you can guess, based on where your property lines are roughly. But the other challenge is getting it all to be the same scale if you have more than one source material, but that's something you can Google. But so I've got a couple of my, site plans in my show notes. This is how I decided to put some island beds out in the sunny part of the lawn between the house and the main road. It's so useful for planning. It's hard to make yourself do it. So this is I'm saying it out loud so that I will actually this year update my site plan with the changes that I've made in the past few years. Key plants I want to put them on there so that I can remember what is where when the snow is covering everything. It's a good exercise. It might give me some answers about what to do with these various projects. Yeah. And so that's definitely on my 2026. Yeah.
How to connect various areas, because I feel like so many gardens that we even visit, people talk about, well, I started here and then a tree came down over here. So I had to start another bed here. And there was a rainwater situation over here. So I had to do a bed here or a border here. And, I feel like a lot of times you just end up with all these disparate areas, right, of your property or even of just a small backyard. And you're like, okay, well, so how do I make sense and connect them? And it's really hard for me, maybe it's just me, but to visualize that when I'm in it instead of seeing it on paper and being able to go, oh, well, if I just, make an entryway there, or I put a pathway here, it makes that landscape kind of start to come together and make sense as a cohesive unit. So, wow, that's a really good one. I have nothing. And I think you can tell when you come to my house and it looks like somebody like who was on way too much caffeine designed their garden because it's a little crazy. So that's a good idea. And I like the idea too, because I'm not artistic at all. I can take a photo, that's about it. But doing using Google Earth or something like that as a starting point would be really valuable for somebody who has zero drawing skills like me.
Tracing paper is your best friend. You invest in large tracing paper. Gridded tracing paper is available. That's very useful.
To help with the scale, obviously. Yep.
To help with the scale. And an engineer scale, which you can get on, probably any Amazon or, specialty, any place that sells from the Alvin catalog. But that's another very useful tool. But you can make your own. And, just out of a piece of graph paper that is, and then you mark what's 5 feet look like, what does 20 feet look like on this graph paper that you can then sort of put onto your thing. The other thing that I suggest is like going out into your garden, then measuring to make sure that it matches what's on the plan. But it's a fun process. It's just like you just kind of gotta kick yourself in the butt to do it.
Yeah. All right. I feel like that's a good summer project. I'm going to put that in the summer because it's too hot to be outside. So that'll be the summer project. All right. I like it. Okay. My number 4 is a shameless plug. And I'm telling you right up front that it's a shameless plug. But I feel really adamantly after we hosted the first Fine Gardening International Tour last year to the UK. We went to England with Annie Guilfoyle. That was something I always wanted to do. I had traveled internationally before, but not with the angle of it being a garden tour. And I found it so incredibly inspirational. You already heard that one of my garden plans for 2026 came out of seeing dead hedges out in the UK used so readily. That's only one of myriad other things that I came back with for ideas and inspiration from that tour. So this year we are going to the Netherlands, which I'm incredibly excited about. Carol is too, because Carol is coming to the Netherlands and yay!
So excited.
So is Annie Guilfoyle. And I really, the Netherlands might not for some listeners seem like an obvious choice for looking at gardens and getting immersed in garden culture, but the Dutch are some of the most seminal designers, nurseries come from the Netherlands. And we really, the way that this tour was put together and orchestrated and the places that we're going to see are, I couldn't be more excited. Darius, I'm more excited about this tour than I was about the England tour for a lot of different reasons. Just a couple of highlights. We are going to Tom DeWitt, who is a very, very famous garden designer and an incredibly gracious and entertainingly funny guy. We are going to his personal garden that has very limitedly been open to any outside visitors. We're going to go, and it's this naturalistic wonderland of just moody textures and this blend of just this gorgeous naturalistic areas, then very, very manicured areas and gravel gardens, and just just dreamy. We will cut in some footage of his garden in the show notes here in the video if you're watching YouTube. Just a very magical place. He's also going to walk us through his own garden and tell us, like, you know, behind the scenes of like why he did what he did. And I love that interaction with the actual garden designers that we've you know, kind of orchestrated. You know, we're visiting a larger commercial project, which, you know, some people are like, why are we going to a commercial project? But I'm thinking of this, it's by Arjen Bokel, and he's created what in my mind is the Laurie Garden of the Netherlands. If you're familiar with the Laurie Garden in Chicago, it was an area of basically commercial wasteland through the center of Chicago, and had really, by Pete Udoff and collaborators, was developed into this gorgeous musical garden now that runs kind of right through the center of the city. And this project of Arjen's is Super Bloom, and it is a very similar project. It was an area that was destitute, terrible soil, full sun, concrete jungle, and he has created this meadowland of color, and we're going to be seeing it at the height of its bloom session. So that's going to be amazing. He's going to be on hand. He is so energetic. I'm like, oh, I'm going to have some extra coffee that day because he's going to be there on hand too. And then just, you know, another highlight for me is Mine Rouse, who is, you know, if we're women in horticulture, if you're a woman in horticulture, in gardening, we owe a debt of gratitude to her. She was really a trailblazing garden designer who really did actually pave the way for a lot of women getting involved in this field that we love so much. And we're going to visit one of her gardens and just see this really innovative cottage garden meets contemporary style that she developed. And I just feel very passionately about that because, you know, go women. So yeah, so I'm very excited about it. It's, you know, I mean, it might be my number one garden plan for 2026. Super, super thrilled about it. We're also visiting nursery owners. One of the nursery owners is taking us on their personal river boat. We're going to go down the river. I mean, all the things. Please go to finegardening.com if you're interested in anything else. I know this sounds like a hard sell, but I wouldn't be speaking so passionately about it if I wasn't so excited. We do a lot of things at Fine Gardening that you don't hear about, but this one I think is pretty special.
It is. And like anybody listening, I mean, it costs money, but like, you know, you could be there in these places in 2026. It's so exciting. Oh my gosh.
It's really It is. And it's, you know, we strive for, you know, a more small, a more personal tour. It's, you know, all these things that, you know, we went into the first round of like, okay, what are all the things that we haven't liked about tours before in the past? And let's do the exact opposite. So, you know, here we are, and it really, it was so much fun last year. And I dare I say, I think it's going to be more fun this year. Well, certainly, because you're going to be with me. Woo!
Oh my gosh. And the tour company that we work with is based in the Netherlands. So like the logistics, like this is their home turf. So
yes.
Like the things that are sort of a pain in the butt when you're traveling on your own, like figuring out where you're going to stay and figuring out how you're going to get to the various places you want to see, all of that part is taken care of. And like, okay, my favorite thing about the trip landing page is the packing list. There's a list of like how many shirts you need. I mean, honestly, that took like any anxiety that I may have had about this trip. It took take that right out of the equation.
Love it. Yeah.
Yes, I hope some podcast listeners join us on this trip because that would make it even more fun.
That definitely would. And if you've got any questions or anything like that, we've got an email that you can, you know, send some questions about the trip. So, well, you know, I feel like top to bottom, we've got some really good plans for 2026.
For sure. Yes. I'm looking forward to it now.
Me too.
It's hard to get into a new year sometimes, but now I'm excited.
Definitely. So let's hear, we got to check in with our pal Peter. We heard from him right before the holidays, but we hadn't heard from him since. So let's check in with our pal Peter and see what he has planned for 2026.
Right then. Apparently it's time for garden goals. Not resolutions, mind you. I've learned my lesson there. These are goals, aspirational, flexible, entirely dependent on the weather, my knees, and whether I can still find my pruners. Goal number 1. I would like to stop buying plants with absolutely no plan. You know the ones. Oh, that looks interesting, followed by, I'm sure I'll find somewhere for it. I will not, in fact, find somewhere for it. It will sit in a pot for 3 months on the side of my driveway while I stare at it, hoping the garden rearranges itself out of sympathy. In 2026, I aim to buy plants only if I already know where they're going. Radical, I know. Goal number 2. I intend to finally accept the things in my garden that simply do not want to be there. There's a Carol Mackey Daphne that's been sulking since 2019. I've moved it, fed it, encouraged it, and spoken to it gently. Nothing. This year, I plan to stop taking its failure personally. Some plants just aren't team players, like those 2 strikers that departed Luton Town Football Club this past year. And in 2026, I'm embracing that. It's not me, it's you. Goal number 3. I'm aiming for fewer grand projects and more small victories. No complete garden overhauls. Just achievable tasks. Edge 1 bed, prune 1 shrub properly. Finish 1 job before starting 6 others. I'd like to experience the rare thrill of saying, yes, that's done, rather than, well, it's started. And finally, my bonus goal for 2026. Find a way, any way, to crash the Fine Gardening Dutch Garden Tour in September. Because Carol and Danielle have been talking about it incessantly, and frankly, it sounds like far too much fun to miss. I don't know if I'll be hiding in a suitcase, posing as an assistant, or pretending I got on the wrong bus. But one way or another, I'll see you in the Netherlands.
Well, that Peter, he is an international man of mystery. You never know where he's going to be and what he's going to be doing, but sounds like he's got some good plans coming up.
Yes. And he always has fun.
He
does. So
this is very true. Must be his English nature. All right. Well, I'm very excited because our guest today, our expert testimony, has gardens in 2 very distinct climates, 2 different gardens, and she is also a garden designer. So I'm really excited to see what she has planned for her 2026 garden plans. So I am very excited to introduce our expert testimony for this podcast episode, kicking off the new year in style with my friend and accomplished author, Susan Calhoun. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Danielle. How are ya?
Good, good. Now, all right, give us a little bio of Susan Calhoun, because you're more than just my friend. You have other accomplishments too.
Well, I have a landscape design company and I've been in business for 28 years, which seems like a super, super long time. And started designing gardens a long time ago and just have had a really good run and a really good business with some really great clients. And recently, in the last couple of years, I got to start showing my work off at Fine Gardening Magazine. You guys have been super generous with showing the things that I do, and the response that I get from that is amazing. I want to thank you for that.
Yes, anybody who's listening, go back to the Fine Gardening archives. As a matter of fact, in the show notes for this, if you're watching on YouTube, we'll drop some links to some of the articles that show some of Susan's work, and we'll put them in our podcast notes too on finegardening.com. If you want to see her full portfolio, though, you're going to want to go to plantswomandesign.com, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Perfect, perfect. And you are a regional reporter for finegardening.com as well from the Pacific Northwest.
Yes, that's really fun. It's fun to be able to talk about my area, about the Pacific Northwest and the different types of things that we have going on there. And the different, when you look at other people in other areas of the US as far as their gardens, ours are very different. So it's very interesting and very fun to share that and get feedback from people about their gardens in the Pacific Northwest.
It is. It's so, I will say I'm always jealous. I'm always jealous because you go out to the Pacific Northwest and I will see some of your beautiful gardens, including your beautiful personal garden of yours. And you'll point to a section and be like, that's 3 years old. And my East Coast brain is like, that's a 15-year-old garden in Connecticut. It's so amazing. You guys just have such great growing conditions, but I know you have your set of challenges as well.
Yes, yes. But it is a great place because you can just grow so many things, so many different zones all together.
So you need to disabuse me of this idea that I think talented garden designers such as yourself, been in the game for multiple decades, you look at your garden and go, it's perfect. I don't need to do anything for 2026. No plans, no notes. We're good. Is that the case?
No, that's really funny. I actually need to start investing in the black plastic companies that are out there because I use a lot of black plastic and I reuse it. So I don't just throw it away. I do reuse it.
Okay, all
But
right.
yeah, there's always something. And I'm always like, now what if I did that? And then I'm
Oh.
jumping in with both feet. And I said at the beginning of this year, I will not make another bed. I will not make another bed.
Oh my goodness. Well, so if you were to say, New Year's Eve just came and went, and you thought, all right, what is my one garden plan for 2026? What rises to the top for your own personal Seattle garden? What is something that a project or a renovation or something that was your number one plan that you're like, I'm going to do that this year?
So I have this area that's really close to the water. My garden has a waterfront,
Yeah.
and there's a patio down there. And right now it's just got a bunch of grass around it, just like lawn grass, just because I just walk down there and then I walk back. But I did a little studying and I talked to a guy that is writing a book, Jeff Epping, about gravel gardens. And I'm going to build a gravel garden down there by this patio
Oh,
because
that's gonna be
from my
stunning.
house, you can look down there and you'll see over it because there's no trees, there's no shrubs or anything like that. It's so, totally drought tolerant, really low things that are kind of creeping around the ground. There's some gravel, obviously, and the layers there will do really good there because it's got a slight slope. And so
Uh,
all the water that we get in the Pacific Northwest, which is tons and tons of water. I don't know if you've seen that. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
it's tons of water.
Experienced it.
So that
Never,
will
never
all,
leave home without my umbrella when I'm there. Yeah.
I know, true. So all of that water should just run off straight towards the bay. So it will stay a lot drier down there in that area because of that slight slope. And yet I'll be able to enjoy the garden from afar. But then when you get into it and you walk down there, it'll be a totally different experience. So I'm
Oh,
looking forward to doing that.
that is such a great idea. Yeah, because that's probably, it already has naturally well-drained soil. So you're not going to be
Uh-huh.
fighting against, you're not going to have to, because a lot of the gravel gardens out in the Pacific Northwest, you have to berm, right?
Right.
Because
Uh-huh.
there's no way you're getting that drainage, but you have that naturally going on because of that sloping effect that's there.
Yes, and it's already very fast draining soil there. So just adding that gravel into it will just make it a lot easier. I'm looking forward to really trying it out. I think it'll be really cool. And the plants that are involved in that are very cool as well. So I'm very excited about that.
Definitely. Having visited Jeff Epping's own personal gravel garden that he did right in the front of his home in Madison, Wisconsin, I
Uh-huh.
want to hear what your neighbors have to say because he said when dump trucks started arriving with tons and tons of gravel and just dumping it into his front yard, his neighbors thought that he had lost his damn mind. Like, so I want to know what your neighbors have to say when you start working on that. So report back, okay?
They already think I'm crazy, so I don't have to worry about it.
Oh my goodness. Well, so Susan, you also have, I feel like we need to get one more garden goal in here, or a garden plan for 2026. And you are a very interesting lady regardless, but very interesting, more interesting now because you have some connections to Prescott, Arizona, and some gardening in Prescott, Arizona, correct? So you're now challenging yourself in this whole new gardening environment.
Yes, it is. And it is a challenge because I have tons and tons of plants I know nothing about.
Yeah.
And I'm learning about those plants. So it's been really interesting. And my methods that I have at this in my garden in Washington don't work down here.
Yeah.
So it's been very interesting because I wanted to just, do a big compost pile and put a bunch of manure and layer it. And you know how you do that and you turn it in the next, 6 months, it's all great. No, it's so dry down here that nothing like that happens. It just lays in this dry layer. So I've had to relearn that, trying to build soil is different. And then the really good drainage is really different.
Hmm,
And this is
definitely.
considered high desert. So it's
Mhm.
actually a zone 7. So I don't get to go and, use all those really great desert plants that they can use in Tucson and in Phoenix. I have to make sure they're hardy. So that's been very interesting. Every time I buy a cactus, is this hardy? Is it not? And there's
Ah,
so many that are hardy that you have to be really careful when you choose. But it's been
how,
really fun.
what a challenge. Yeah, and completely different
Oh, yeah.
from Pacific Northwest and yeah, your plant Bible that you probably rely upon is out the door right now.
Yeah, there's some things that are really great, like manzanita grows all really, really well here because it's just dry and it's, lots and lots of quick drainage, which manzanita loves. So that grows all over, and you're like, this is a Oregon plant. You see this on the coast in Oregon and in Washington. But yeah, so there's some crossovers. So you do get to use some of the same plants, but there's a whole bunch of brand new ones I get to learn.
Well, so in 2026, a garden plan, what was the no same question. What was the number one garden plan or garden idea or garden project that you're going to investigate for your gardening pursuits in Prescott, Arizona?
So I'm going to go ahead and build a garden round towards the back of the property that I'm on. And it will have kind of a mixture of grasses, but a lot of different kinds of yucca. I mean, I bought 4 different
Uh,
yuccas, just yesterday. Imagine me going to the nursery and buying plants.
I'm
I just
just
don't
jealous
even,
that in January you can go to a nursery and there's something other than, leftover holiday
yes.
wreaths.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so putting that kind of in and I've been doing a little bit of collecting. If you follow my Instagram account, I do a lot of hiking and I was hiking and found um ferns that are growing in the cracks and the crevices of these rocks, these big granite rocks. And there's these ferns growing in there. And I'm like, there's no soil, there's no moisture. There's no soft, water filled air around them. It's as dry as can be, but these little ferns are growing in there. They're about a foot high, and they're like, okay, I'm like, okay, I've got to try to figure that out and get those, grow those. Because I mean, who knew ferns would grow in such a dry climate? But they really are. So that's very cool. So
Yeah, so just this whole myriad probably of alpine plants that are endemic to the area that you
yes.
might be able to incorporate into some of the native plantings that it seems like you have planned for that back area of the property.
Yes, lots of natives, and I don't think they appreciate their natives here like they should. I mean, there's a plant called the Apache plume, which is like a smoke tree. It's like bright pink smoke things on the very ends of the branches.
Oh.
And there's a one called the cliff rose, and that's got little roses on it. But when it goes to seed pods, they have little squirrely, like they're like snake like. Their seed pods are like little snakes that have fuzz all over them, and then they blow around and they look like fuzzy snakes blowing all over the place. It's
Oh,
crazy. So
Oh, that's
just
adorable.
just new plants with new things. And it's just so much fun to learn something new, which I love about gardening. You can learn something new every day about gardening.
That is so encouraging because, like I said, I thought, oh, garden designer, award-winning garden designer. Yeah, she's figured it all out. But it sounds like 2026, you're going to still be learning new things and a whole new plant palette.
Yes, yes, it's going to be really fun. So
That's awesome. Well, Happy New Year, Susan. Thank you so much for weighing in on this podcast topic. I think it was perfectly suited for you.
thank you so much for letting me chit chat with you again and share what I've got planned for 2026.
Yay. All right. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Well, I was so heartened, I think is the word, by the fact that even an established, super talented garden designer still has things that she wants to adjust and do differently and planning for in the next year. That made me feel better about all the craziness that I've got going on around my house.
Yeah, I think the more we do this job, the more we realize like everybody has craziness and projects and yeah,
Totally.
it's
And
kind
it's
of the
never
fun
too late.
part of gardening.
Yes, and it's never too late to fix
late.
it.